There are more alligators living in the state of Florida right now than there are people living in the entire city of Miami and Orlando combined. Not a few thousand more, not a rounding error, over 1 million more. And that number keeps climbing every single year in a state that also happens to be adding more human residents than almost anywhere else in the country. Two populations expanding into the exact same rivers, the exact same lakes, the exact same backyards at the same time. What happens when the fastest growing predator population in America collides head-on with the fastest growing human population in America is not a hypothetical. It is already happening, and almost nobody outside the state understands how close to the edge this balance actually is. To understand how strange this moment really is, you have to go back to a time when Florida had almost no alligators left at all. By the 1950s, unregulated hunting for the exotic leather trade had pushed the species to the brink across huge parts of its range. Hide hunters worked the swamps with no limits, no seasons, and no oversight whatsoever. And demand from fashion houses in Europe and the United States meant every alligator caught had a buyer waiting. By the time anyone in government took the decline seriously, alligators had vanished from large stretches of habitat where they had lived for millions of years. In 1966, the federal government listed the American alligator as endangered. In 1973, it came under the full protection of the newly passed Endangered Species Act. For an animal that had outlived the dinosaurs, it had taken humans less than a century to nearly finish the job. Then something unusual happened. The recovery didn't just work, it overshot every expectation conservationists had. By 1987, the American alligator was declared fully recovered, one of the fastest, most complete comebacks in the history of the Endangered Species Act. Today, Florida's official estimate sits at roughly 1.3 million alligators, spread across all 67 counties in the state, inhabiting an estimated 6.7 million acres of suitable wetland habitat. That number alone should stop you. 67 out of 67 counties. There is not a single corner of Florida left where alligators do not live. But raw population size is only half the story, and it's the less important half. The real story is where those alligators are now expanding into, because Florida's human population has exploded at almost exactly the same pace, and both species are converging on the same limited strip of livable land. Florida gains close to 1,000 new residents every single day, and a huge share of that growth is happening in exactly the kind of low-lying, water-adjacent development that alligators have always considered home. Retention ponds behind subdivisions, golf course water hazards, canals cut through new neighborhoods to manage drainage. Every one of those is functionally alligator habitat, built by humans, often without a second thought about who was already living in the water underneath it. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission has a name for what happens when the two collide. A nuisance alligator, defined as any animal at least 4 feet long that is believed to pose a threat to people, pets, or property. In 2023 alone, contracted trappers responded to roughly 10,000 of those calls across the state. 10,000. That works out to more than 27 nuisance alligator calls a day, every single day of the year, and the number has been climbing steadily as development pushes deeper into wetland edges. Here's the detail that should genuinely worry you. Florida currently licenses only about 113 nuisance alligator trappers to cover the entire state. That is one trapper for roughly every 12,000 square miles of Florida landmass, responding to a call volume that keeps rising every single year. The math on that ratio does not look sustainable, and wildlife officials know it. Quick question before we go further. If you saw a 10-foot alligator sitting in the median of a highway, what do you think the actual legal process is for removing it? Drop your guess below, because the real answer involves a level of bureaucracy that has left law enforcement officers standing helplessly next to a live alligator, waiting for a licensed trapper to arrive because they are not legally permitted to touch it themselves. That is not a hypothetical either. It has happened on an interstate highway in Jacksonville, in broad daylight with traffic backed up in both directions, while officers waited for a single specialist with the correct permit to physically remove the danger sitting on the road. That single incident is far from isolated, and the pattern behind it is what should really give you pause. As Florida's suburbs push further into former wetland, alligators are turning up in places that, on paper, should never intersect with daily human life at all. Golf courses report alligators emerging directly onto fairways during tournament play. Homeowners across the state have opened garage doors to find an alligator sheltering from the heat inside. Swimming pools, normally the last place anyone expects a predator capable of exceeding 1,000 pounds, have become common enough nuisance calls that FWC's own literature specifically lists pools as a recurring problem location. Each of these calls individually sounds almost comedic, a strange local news story shared for a laugh. Stacked together 10,000 times a year, they describe something closer to a slow-motion territorial dispute playing out across an entire state, one backyard at a time. The animals involved in these encounters are not always small. Alligators are capable of explosive, short-burst movement on land that catches most people completely off guard, launching forward at speeds that can outrun a human sprinting in a straight line over the first several yards. Combine that physical capability with an animal now routinely surfacing in suburban drainage ponds, barely 30 feet from a swing set, and the danger stops being theoretical. It becomes a matter of when, not if, an encounter escalates past the point of simply calling a hotline number and waiting. The reason relocation isn't the obvious fix is almost as unsettling as the problem itself. Wildlife officials do not relocate nuisance alligators because moving them doesn't actually solve anything. Alligators possess a homing instinct strong enough that a captured animal will frequently attempt to travel back to its original capture site, sometimes crossing considerable distances of unfamiliar human-populated territory to do it. And the remote areas that would seem like safe release points are rarely empty. They already support their own established alligator populations with their own territorial hierarchies, meaning a relocated animal is essentially being dropped into someone else's turf, triggering conflict between the animals themselves. So instead, growing numbers, growing development, and an unavoidable animal are simply left to occupy the same space indefinitely with no long-term solution beyond removing the most dangerous individuals one at a time. Now layer the growth curve on top of that. Florida's population isn't just large, it is still actively expanding in the same wetland-adjacent corridors that have always been prime alligator nesting ground. Females build nests of packed vegetation and soil, laying between 32 and 46 eggs at a time, with incubation running roughly 63 to 68 days before hatching in late summer. A single healthy female can repeat that cycle year after year for decades, since alligators can live upward of 50 years, occasionally longer in ideal conditions. Multiply that reproductive output across a population measured in the millions, occupying nearly every wetland acre the state has, and you get a species with essentially no ceiling on further growth other than the amount of remaining habitat left to expand into. And that remaining habitat is shrinking every year for the opposite reason. Humans are building on it. There's a second predator working against the alligator in that same shrinking habitat, and it makes the whole picture even more volatile. Since the 1990s, invasive Burmese pythons, likely released or escaped from the exotic pet trade, have established a breeding population throughout the Everglades, and researchers have documented them as direct competitors and, in some cases, predators of juvenile alligators. Studies tracking mammal populations in python-heavy regions of the Everglades have recorded declines exceeding 90% for species like raccoons and opossums, animals that would otherwise be part of the food web supporting young alligators as they grow. In a handful of documented cases, researchers have even found evidence of pythons and alligators killing one another outright. The state now runs organized python removal contests specifically because the invasive snake has become numerous enough to measurably disrupt the ecosystem the alligator depends on. So the same wetlands driving Florida's alligator boom are simultaneously hosting an entirely separate, unrelated predator crisis, competing for the same shrinking real estate with no clear resolution to either problem in sight. The size these animals are capable of reaching only makes the collision more unsettling. Florida's official state record for length stands at 14 feet 3.5 inches, a male pulled from Lake Washington in Brevard County. The state's weight record belongs to a male from Orange Lake in Alachua County, measuring 13 feet 10.5 inches and weighing in at 1,043 pounds, more than half a ton of muscle and armored hide, capable of moving explosively over short distances on land despite its size. An animal that large does not read as wildlife anymore. It reads as something out of a different era entirely, sharing a canal with a family swimming pool fence. Florida's alligator boom isn't happening in isolation either. Sharing many of the same South Florida canals and coastal wetlands is a second, far rarer crocodilian that tells almost the opposite story. and understanding it puts the alligator's recovery in even sharper relief. The American crocodile, easily confused with its far more common cousin by anyone who isn't looking closely, collapsed to somewhere between 200 and 300 individuals statewide by the mid-1970s, driven down by the same hide hunting and coastal development pressures. Its recovery came from an almost accidental source. Cooling canals dug around the Turkey Point nuclear power plant near Miami created, entirely unintentionally, some of the best crocodile nesting habitat in the state. Today, more than 1,500 American crocodiles live in South Florida, a nearly tenfold increase since the 1970s, expanding back into Biscayne Bay and coastal counties they had abandoned decades earlier. Two crocodilian species, recovering side by side in the same waterways, at wildly different scales, both now converging on the same crowded stretch of South Florida coastline that developers are simultaneously racing to build on. Climate patterns are adding one more variable to an already unstable equation. Research on alligator populations has linked increasing drought frequency and severity across the Southeast, including sizable portions of Florida, to rising egg mortality, since alligator nest humidity plays a direct role in hatching success. Drier conditions don't just threaten individual nests, they concentrate alligators into a shrinking number of remaining water sources during dry spells, pushing more animals into closer contact with each other and with the exact same retention ponds, canals, and golf course lakes that now sit at the center of suburban Florida. A population already living at high density, in habitat already being consumed by development, facing an added squeeze from a drying climate, is not a population trending toward a quieter, more manageable future. It is a population being compressed from multiple directions at once, into less and less space. At the same time, more people are moving into that space than ever before. To put the population trajectory in perspective, look at what happened one state over. Louisiana ran a similar recovery program starting around the same era, and its population has since been estimated at more than 3 million alligators statewide, nearly triple Florida's official count, in a state with a fraction of Florida's human population density. If Florida's alligator population were ever to trend toward that same ratio relative to available habitat, the current tension between development and wildlife wouldn't just continue. It could become one of the defining wildlife management crises anywhere in the country, playing out not in some remote, unpopulated wilderness, but directly behind suburban fences, inside golf course water traps, and along the drainage canals that cut through some of the fastest-growing residential areas in the United States. Consider what that would actually look like on the ground. Louisiana's higher density already means encounters with large alligators in populated waterways are treated as a routine, almost daily fact of life in parts of that state, folded quietly into how residents park their boats, walk their dogs, and let their children near canal banks. If Florida's numbers ever closed even part of that gap while its human population keeps growing at its current pace, the same casual coexistence would be happening across some of the densest, most rapidly built suburban corridors in the entire country, not the comparatively rural bayou country where Louisiana's population is concentrated. That is the scenario wildlife officials are quietly trying to stay ahead of, using a management system built decades ago for a very different Florida than the one being built today. There is a reason Florida still permits organized, tightly regulated hunting of the very species it works so hard to save, and it isn't for sport alone. The statewide alligator harvest program, established in 1988, is now held up nationally and internationally as a model for sustainable wildlife management. Each year, more than 15,000 people apply through a lottery-style drawing for roughly 7,000 available harvest permits, each allowing up to 2 alligators to be taken under strict quotas tied to ongoing habitat surveys and population monitoring. It is, in effect, a controlled release valve on a population that both officials and biologists agree could otherwise grow past the point where the state's remaining wetland habitat, increasingly squeezed by human construction, could comfortably support it. And still, even with a permitted harvest, even with a nuisance program, even with all 67 counties monitored, the population has not slowed down. It has held essentially steady at roughly 1.3 million for years, absorbing everything removed through hunting and nuisance trapping and effectively replacing it through reproduction the very next season. That is not a population in decline. That is a population that has fully adapted to coexisting alongside the pressure humans apply to it, which raises an uncomfortable question that wildlife managers are only beginning to say out loud. If the current tools, permits, trappers, and harvest quotas are already running near capacity just to hold the population level, What happens in the next 20 years as another few million people move into the exact same corridors these animals have occupied for longer than humans have existed as a species at all? The most unsettling part of this entire story isn't the record-breaking size of individual alligators or the raw scale of the population number itself. It's the direction both lines on the graph are pointing. Florida's human population curve is climbing. Florida's alligator population curve, after one of the greatest conservation recoveries in American history, has leveled off at a height nobody in the 1950s could have imagined and shows no sign of coming back down. Two species expanding into the exact same shrinking footprint of livable land, with a system of just over 100 licensed trappers standing between order and something considerably harder to control. Florida didn't just bring the alligator back from the edge of extinction. It built an entire modern civilization on top of the animal's old territory and is now discovering, one nuisance call at a time, exactly what that decision is going to keep costing for decades to come.